let's begin today the third theory of international business. We have completed mercantilism theory, theory of absolute advantage by Adam Smith, okay, and today we'll be studying the theory of comparative advantage. Now, this comparative advantage theory was given by Mr. David Ricardo. I'm sure you've heard this name. He's also a famous economist. It was given in the year 1817. So every theory, as I told, remember the author who gave it and also remember the year it was proposed. So what is this comparative advantage? It is an economist's ability to produce a particular good or a service at a lower opportunity cost than its trading partners. So it's important to realize here the concept of opportunity cost. So at the same time, if you're going to have, if a person can produce, let's say, one table, and at the same time with 1 hour's time he can produce one clock, okay, one table or one clock within 1 hour of time. So in order to produce table, he has to let go of production of a clock, or if he chooses to produce clock, maybe because it gives him more profit, I have to let go of purchasing or production of table. I'll just repeat. Let's say Mr. A has with 1 hour of labor he can produce one table, and with the same 1 hour he can produce one clock or a wall clock, okay. The time taken is 1 hour. So he has to choose between whether he can do a table or he wants to do a clock, because he cannot do both the things in the same given time. So he needs to make a choice what he needs to produce, right? Producing table will give him a higher profit, or producing clock will give him a higher profit. It is for Mr. A to decide. If he is going to choose, let's say, table, so the opportunity cost of production of table is losing the production of clock. Hope you got it. On the other side, if A is choosing production of clock, then the opportunity cost is letting go of production of table. Is that clear? So here we are talking about in comparative advantage the opportunity cost that one country has over another. International trade can take place if absolute advantage exists in both commodities. Now I want you to recall over here this example, okay, in absolute advantage where we studied. So India had absolute advantage in production of tables and Nepal had absolute advantage in production of clocks. So that way they could exchange the goods wherever they were most efficient in. That's what Adam Smith spoke about. But here what David Ricardo speaks is, what if both the countries, or if just one country has absolute advantage over both the products. That is, let's take the same example. Let's say India has absolute advantage in tables and in clock. You got my point? David Ricardo says, if this is the scenario, then how can I manufacture, or how can two countries enter into international trade? Let's look at the assumption of the trade theory. Only one element of cost of production is labor. So both absolute advantage and comparative advantage, both the theories considers labor as the only cost of production. Now trade takes place only between two countries. These are the few assumptions that is taken up by the theory. Only two products are traded, because even in the example I just mentioned to you, right, only two products, and there is no transport cost or any kind of transportation cost is not considered. These are the four assumptions of the theory. So what does countries have to do? Export the commodity in which the comparative advantage is the highest. Please note that word, comparative advantage is the highest. That means it has comparative advantage, absolute advantage in two products, but it has comparative advantage is only one or highest. So that product the country has to export. Is that clear? So export of that commodity, so import of that commodity in which the comparative advantage is again the highest. So which country has to import products? Let's say that country can produce a particular good or a commodity in a very low cost of production. That means production is cheap in that particular country, right? So such countries can import that commodity. Why? Because their comparative advantage is less. So let's look at an example over here. Okay, let's first study the meaning of opportunity cost. What is opportunity cost? I already gave an example, right, of Mr. A choosing over table over the clock, or choosing clock over the table. So every choice that we make has a value to us, not just in business, even in our lives, in our day-to-day lives, right? Either we can study or either we can do a particular task in one given time period. Okay, so if you have to choose one work or a task over the other task, that letting go, right, the opportunity of choice is what you gave up to get it. So if Mr. A chooses to produce tables, then he is letting go of production of clock. Let's say he chooses to produce clock, then he has to give up or let go the production of tables. So to make a good economic decision, any country has to choose with the option of greatest benefit and lowest cost. So if Mr. A is choosing production of table, that means he is deriving most benefit from production of table but having the lowest cost. Got it? Or he might choose production of clocks where the benefit is high and the cost is low. Let's see an example here. So here we have the data given, that is output per hour of labor. So in 1 hour, one labor or one worker, how much can he produce? Okay, so we have country A and country B. What are the goods in this example? Wheat and cotton. Now they have given you the details, units per hour that laborer can produce. Under country A, one laborer can produce in 1 hour 6 units of wheat. Whereas country B, in 1 hour, one person can produce only 1 unit of wheat. Coming to the next commodity, cotton. In country A, one person can produce only 4 units per hour. Okay, under country A, one worker taking 1 hour's time can produce 4 units of cotton. Whereas in country B, they can produce 2 units of cotton. Now this is the example. You remember what we saw in absolute advantage, right? Where India had the advantage in tables, production of tables, and Nepal had the advantage in production of clocks. But here you can see country A is dominant over country B. Yes or no? Because country A is good at production of both wheat as well as cotton. So what we understand here is that country A has absolute advantage. Okay, both the products country A can efficiently produce than country B. What about country B? Country B has absolute disadvantage in production of wheat and cotton. That is what we see, right, on the table. As we observe, wheat it can produce 1 unit and cotton it can produce 2 units. So that way both commodities country B has absolute disadvantage. Now the question arises, in such scenario or such a situation, can country A and B enter into international trade or trade between these two countries? Now, according to Adam Smith theory, it says no. But David Ricardo proves it in this theory. He says yes, country A and country B can enter into international trade. So let's see how. So first, now here we got to know previously that country A has absolute advantage over both the products than country B. Now let's find out the comparative advantage. Okay, now let's see, for country A, find which commodity is better for production. So when you're able to find out comparative advantage, you first need to look into the ratio. Okay, so the ratio of producing wheat is greater than cotton. So country A has a comparative advantage in producing wheat over B. Now here what you can observe is, look at the ratio, 6:1 and 4:1. Which ratio is higher? 6:1 is higher or 4:2 is higher? Of course, 6:1 is the highest ratio. Or just in case if we can observe, wheat production is higher than cotton production for country A. So here I am comparing, okay, I am making sure there is a comparative advantage, not just absolute. Absolute advantage, country A is dominating, but in comparative advantage, if we see, country A has comparative advantage in producing what? Wheat over country B. If you can say, ma'am, even 4:2 is not such a difference in ratio. Now if you look at cotton, country A is able to produce just twice of what B is producing. 4:2 is what? Again, if you simplify, it becomes 2:1. That means twice of country B. But when you look at wheat, the first commodity, 6 times it can produce more than the country B. That's what we call it as comparative advantage. So what did we get to know? Country A has a comparative advantage in production of wheat. Now let's move on to country B. Now country B, which commodity is better for production? Because David Ricardo is trying to prove that these two countries can enter into international trade. So again, let's look at the ratio. When we look at the ratio here, look from the point of country B now, okay, not from the point of country A. 1:6, or you can just read it as it is, 6:1 and 4:2. Where is the difference? What difference can closely country B meet? Country B, can it be equal to country A in production of wheat? Absolutely no. But it can be somewhere close in production of cotton, because it's just twice the production of country A. Therefore, country B has comparative advantage in producing cotton. Okay, so if country B has to compete with country A, can it compete with wheat? Absolutely not. Wheat production is most highest and efficient in country A. But where can country B compete now if it has to enter into trade? The only option left is cotton, because cotton comparatively, if you see, it's 4:2. That means compared to 6:1, 4:2 is better for country B. Look from the perspective of countries B production or countries B's efficiency. Okay. Now why we are not choosing wheat but we are choosing cotton here is because the benefit of producing wheat is high when country A produces it. Now if you say, no, let's not country B, let it produce wheat and not cotton. Can it meet the same efficiency as country A? Definitely not. When does country B benefit in production of wheat? Only when country A produces it. Got my point? With the same given time, if country B produces wheat, it can only produce 1 unit per hour. But at the same given time, you give the opportunity for country A, it can produce 6 units per hour. Understood? So here we understood country A has comparative advantage in wheat, country B has comparative advantage in cotton. Hope you understood the comparative advantage of both the countries. Now here we enter into trade. Comparative advantage trade. Now country A and B enter into trade. Country A says, okay, I will give you 6 units of wheat, for which B will tell, I will give you 6 units of cotton. This is the agreement between country A and country B. Country A is ready to export 6 units of wheat and import 6 units of cotton, whereas country B is ready to export 6 units of cotton and import 6 units of wheat. Now let's see how this agreement works. For country A, let's say if there was no trade, okay, there's no international trade between these two countries, and country A produced 6 units of wheat and exchanged it domestically, it would have only got 4 units of cotton. You remember the first table where it produces 6 units of wheat and 4 units of cotton. That was the scenario if there was no trade. Now because now here we are entering into the trade, country A is getting how many units of cotton? 6 units of cotton. If there was no trade, how many units of cotton country A would have got? 4 units of cotton. So country A is benefited by 2 units of cotton. That is, if no trade, it had to produce only 4 units. Now because it is entering into international trade, it is able to import 6 units. Okay, so 6 minus 4, 2 units is the benefit country A is deriving. So half an hour time is what country A saves, right? Because what we looked into the example, country A within 1 hour can produce 4 units. That means in half an hour it can produce 2 units. So by importing cotton, country A is saving half an hour of time. So country A gave up the production of cotton to produce wheat, which is called as what? Opportunity cost. Got it? Country A gave up the production of cotton to produce wheat. Let's see from country B's perspective. If no trade, country B had to spend 6 hours to get 6 units of wheat. Isn't that true? If you looked at the first table, we saw that country B produces 1 hour only 1 unit of wheat. But now because of trade, if there was no trade, to produce the same 6 units of wheat, how many hours should country B work? Country B should work 6 hours to get 6 units of wheat. But because of trade, country B can get 6 units of wheat. That way, it will also save 6 hours of time so that it can produce 12 units of cotton with 12 hours in total. Now remember, how many units does country B produce in cotton? 2 units every hour. Okay. Now with the 6 hours of saving, the country can produce 12 units of cotton. In 1 hour it can produce 2 units. So with 6 hours, how many units can it produce? 6 into 2. 12 units of cotton is what country B can produce in total. So what is the cost to enter into trade for country B? To give up 6 units of cotton. How many units of cotton country B is producing? 12 units. But can it enjoy all the 12 units cotton it is producing? No. If it has to enter into trade, it has to give up 6 units of cotton. That means it has made an agreement with country A. I will export 6 units of cotton to country A. So therefore, it produces 12 units and it has to export 6 units, for which country B is incurring a opportunity cost. Hope you understood the example under comparative advantage theory. So with this, David Ricardo proves that countries can enter into trade under comparative advantage theory, and we can see that both the countries are being benefited. Both the countries, just see here, country A is manufacturing wheat and also is getting cotton from country B. Country B is only manufacturing cotton and it is exporting it to country A, plus it is also importing wheat from country A. So David Ricardo, with this example, hope you can understand that he proves even though one country has absolute advantage in two products or in both the commodities, still these countries can enter into international trade. Okay, so this completes your comparative advantage theory.